Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tessie, and I've worked at SHPO for a few years with the archaeology people. And today I will be discussing the archaeology of Saltair. To start out, I will give you an overview of the history of Saltair. Then I will describe some of the work our team has conducted and include an overview of my master's research on the topic. And finally, I will show the looting situation at the site. If you are familiar with the Salt Lake area, you may be picturing this funny music venue out near Magna. This building we refer to as Saltair 3, and this is not actually what we will be discussing today. Rather, we will be talking about Saltair 1 and 2, which were located just a few miles away from where Saltair is today. Saltair 1 was constructed in 1893 and burned down in 1925. And Saltair 2 was constructed on the same spot in 1929 and, just like Saltair 1, burned down in 1970. Saltair is interesting because there are many people living today who remember either seeing Saltair 2 from I-80 or even remember visiting the resort while it was open. Now to the history. The land that Salt Lake City and Saltair inhabit are in what was the buffer zone between the ancestral homelands of the Shoshone, Goshute, and Ute tribes. In 1847, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints moved into the area. The Great Salt Lake became a place of leisure and healing for the people of the territory of Utah. Here in this advertisement, you can see that it was described as the Dead Sea of America and says that it has curative qualities. It became common for locals to visit the lake, to float in the water, and enjoy the beaches. Here's an image of bathers at Black Rock Beach. Soon, individuals began to capitalize on this trend and began building resorts along the shores of the lake. Here we have the Garfield Beach Resort. The LDS Church wanted to become involved in the resort business, partly for profit and largely to build a resort that abided by LDS standards. The other resorts were built by what was described as Gentiles, or people who were not members of the LDS Church. The church worried that these resorts would be a bad influence on young members of the church, and they organized the Saltair Beach Company. The LDS Church selected a spot about 15 miles west of Salt Lake City to build their resort. In addition, they formed the Saltair Railway Company, soon renamed the Salt Lake and Los Angeles Railway Company, and built a railroad that would take passengers straight to Saltair. The LDS Church hired Richard K.A. Kluting, a German architect who had worked on major projects in Europe before moving to Utah to design the pavilion. Kluting later designed various buildings in Utah, most notably the state capitol. Saltair was constructed in 1893, and the pavilion was a Moorish-inspired structure that was elevated above the water to give patrons the feeling that they were traveling to a distant land far from the monotony of their daily lives. The LDS Church wanted to prove to the world that Utah was not simply a dry and dreary desert wasteland, but a bustling metropolis that provided all the leisures of civilization. The pavilion was larger than any other resort on the Great Salt Lake, and the church wanted Saltair to be the Coney Island of the West. Thousands of electric lights line the exterior of the pavilion, allowing the grand architecture to be visible at night in a dazzling display of light. And here I have a map of Saltair, and you can see the layout. In the center you have the pavilion, and then the wings on the left and right. And it was pretty simple at this time, and it's the first decade of Saltair. And you can imagine rolling up on the railroad and approaching the pavilion. People would come in their best clothing to kind of show off what they had. And Yeah, I guess today we would kind of expect people to show up in bathing suits, but that's not what the culture of the time was. But bathing was a big part of Saltair. And here you can see bathers floating in the water. And you have Saltair there in the background. And these piers were built out to allow bathers to have a large area where they can access the water. But in addition, the changing rooms were down lower, so people could bathe or change into their bathing suits and kind of be out of the eye of the people dressed in their fancy clothes up on the pier, because in part it was not proper to be seen in a bathing suit, and they could go down in the water out far away from everyone else. And this is what the bathing suits looked like. And Saltair would rent bathing suits out to individuals. Often the bathing suits were too big. As you can see on the lady on the left, the swimsuit seems quite large on her. But bathing was not the only attraction. A huge attraction was dancing in the pavilion, as you can see in this image. And Saltair also provided bands to play the music for the dancing. And they had carnival style attractions such as a roller coaster and shooting gallery. And these were built up over time to attract more visitors and to continue creating interest in Saltair. A hippodrome was built, and it was intended for bicycle races, but it turned out that the Salt Palace in Salt Lake City was more popular for bicycle racing. So they ended up using the hippodrome for other things, such as more dancing. And a restaurant was built so that people visiting would have a place to eat. And excursion boats were often sent out. People could view the lake from a boat. And here's another map. If you remembered from the last map, Saltair was pretty basic. But now we have more attractions that were added around here. Down on the bottom, you have the restaurant and the hippodrome, and there was a roller coaster up near the top, but they moved it over near the hippodrome later on. And in 1925, Saltair burned down, and they wanted to continue the legacy of Saltair, and they decided to rebuild it. And so in 1929, they rebuilt Saltair, and this is what it looked like. It resembles Saltair 1 quite a bit, but they simplified it a little bit. They wanted to save a little money on construction since they just went through a fire. And they also kind of changed the design a little bit. You can see there are more stripes than there were before, just kind of match the aesthetics of the time a little bit more. But Saltair 2 never really got its popularity back. They tried to maintain the layout of Saltair 1 and then continued adding attractions, but it just never became popular again. A big part of that was the water was receding, and since Saltair was centered around bathing, that was a huge problem, and they even built a retaining pond to kind of allow bathers to have a place to go without having to walk out to the shoreline, which was quite far away. But even then, the resort fell into disrepair. And here we have Karen displaying the disrepair at Saltair. Not sure why she's posing with these pictures, but I found them funny, so thought I would include them. And just like Saltair 1, Saltair 2 burned down in 1970. This time it was in arson, but the building was abandoned, so there wasn't a lot going on there at this point. So Utah SHPO has been doing work out at Saltair to record the archaeological features that exist today. And here you see the causeway that led up to Saltair. And from here, it looks like there's not a lot going on, but there's actually a lot on the surface. There's a lot of artifacts, and you can kind of see the layout of what it once was. You have the parking lot here, and you also have what was the roller coaster, kind of near the parking lot. The pavilion would have been here at the end of the causeway, and you can kind of picture the arms of the pier going out. And so our team has gone out and done surveys where we look at the ground to record what we see on the surface. We're focusing on permanent features that can't be moved, such as the pilings that once held up the pavilion. We're also looking at artifacts to get an idea of the life that people were living out at Saltair, to give us some insight into what they were doing, maybe showing things that the historical record doesn't tell. And in this image, showing some of the things you can find on the surface. And I think there are a lot of cool things out there. There's an old fire truck that got stuck out in the water. You have a shoe, you have light fixtures, you have stairs, an eyeglass from eyeglasses, and a metal sink. And then here we have someone's signature from 1924, and also some bricks from an old building at Saltair. And I've been involved in these efforts. Here I am, I'm taking a GPS point and also propping up a gable for a photo. And so this led to me focusing on Saltair for my master's research at the University of Idaho. The title of my thesis is "To Make a Pure Resort, Conflict Between Temperance and Profit at Saltair under the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints." And since the church owned Saltair from 1893 to 1906, and they also had shares from 1906 to 1925, alcohol was very controversial at Saltair. And if you're not already aware of LDS attitudes towards alcohol, in the Word of Wisdom, which was given by Joseph Smith, he said that the use of wine, strong drinks, tobacco, and hot drinks is prescribed. And so kind of shows that the LDS Church strongly is against alcohol, but it isn't just the LDS Church that had this going. At the time, we had the temperance movement, and this was basically a movement that was aiming for prohibition of alcohol, and it helped influence the LDS Church in their prescription of alcohol. It was also a very strong movement during the time Saltair was around, and Saltair was around briefly during Prohibition, but it also burned down during that time, which is important to note. Originally, Saltair wanted to ban alcohol to kind of enforce morality at the resort, but ultimately they decided that they needed to sell alcohol to keep the resort going and to bring in profit. This is the original program from the first year Saltair was operating. And on the left, you can see they're advertising Fisher Beer, which was a local company that has been resurrected recently in Salt Lake City. And on the right, they're advertising Anheuser-Busch beer. And so this is what the situation looks like at Saltair today. On the right, you have the base of a beer bottle, and on the left, you have the base of a liquor flask. And so what I'm doing for my thesis is looking at what they had out there and also the spatial distribution. I'm still working on the data analysis, so I don't have that lined out yet, but hopefully I will soon, and maybe that will be a future installment. But from what I can tell so far is that the alcohol and liquor seem to be kind of diverse, so people were probably bringing their own alcohol and drinking it at the resort. But I will find out more soon in my data analysis. I'm also looking at soda bottles because there are a lot of soda bottles and it was the alternative to alcohol. So I'm comparing the two just to see the differences in how people were consuming these. A local brand is the most common. It was called Red Seal brand from the Salt Lake City Soda Water Company. And it's pictured on the top left. And on the bottom left, there's a Coke bottle. There's quite a few Coke bottles out there, which is not surprising. And on the right is another local soda company called Den Halter. So this just kind of gives you an idea of where I'm heading with my research, and I hope I'll have a good conclusion to this soon for my master's work. And I also want to discuss looting at Saltair because it's been a big problem. In this image, you can see the aerial photography just showing these huge areas where people were looting in 2018. We're kind of working to try and prevent people from doing that. And also recording Saltair in case of future looting so that we can get that data before it's gone. In this video, I'm going to show you kind of the looting situation at Saltair. All these holes you see in the landscape are looting holes. They are not natural. Naturally, the lake would be flat. The lake bed would be flat other than the areas that were built up for Saltair when it was in operation. Just to give you an idea of the magnitude of looting. And we just want people to know that archaeologists aren't trying to hoard all these things away. We'd rather have the artifacts and all that still be out there so that when people visit the site, they can see all of the soda bottles and alcohol bottles and everything else, like the sink and the fire truck. We want that to all be there so that people get a feel of the atmosphere of Saltair, which I think is very important. And it's really cool to see when you're out there. So I just want to encourage people to not take things, because when you take things, you're taking them away from other people who might want to see them when they visit the site. And I'll just kind of, it'll zoom down to show this large looted area in a moment. There we go. So I'm not sure exactly what people are looking for. It might actually be bottles. There are probably full bottles on below the surface. There might be other things that they're finding out there. And yeah, just giving you an overview. So part of our effort to prevent looting is erecting signs. We have a few little tiny ones, but we also have this big one that was designed by Whitney Seal. And as you can see, recently it's been shot. There's some gun holes, which is unfortunate, but I feel like It's working a little bit. Looting seems to have been going down, but we'll find out in the future. All right, and here are some references, and if you want more information, many of these are easily available, or you can find them on Amazon. And thank you for watching. I also want to bring attention to 2 movies that feature Saltair. They're both available on YouTube, so just if you do a basic YouTube search, you'll find them. We have The Giant Brine Shrimp, which is a short movie, and it's pretty funny. Highly recommend it. And there's also The Carnival of Souls. These were both filmed when Saltair 2 was, after it had been abandoned, but it's pretty cool to see Saltair in videos from the time it was still around. And I want to give out acknowledgements to the Chabot team and also to my mom. She helped me at Saltair a little bit and took some of the pictures that I'm showing. Also, she's a healthcare worker, which is incredibly important during this time. All right, thank you for watching.